We just got back from LTX, and the very first thing that we're doing back here in the studio is a Flippin' Friday episode because it's been over a month and a half since we last built a budget gaming PC and then of course flipped it. So let's get into this one. I promise this is the last time that I'm going to feature this motherboard because I'm not sure how repeatable the deal is, but this is my last MSI Z490-A Pro ATX, and this is the board that I found used on Woot for just 50 bucks. This sale actually happened on two separate occasions, and I bought two of them during both sales, but if you're trying to copy a build like this from home, then just go with any Z490 motherboard because they are pretty cheap right now. The CPU I'm plugging into this is the Intel i5-10400F, and since I already had this solid motherboard deal, this is the best possible CPU option for a flip like this in my opinion. If you start with the 10400F, then you certainly don't have to go with a Z490, and rather you can get like a B460, but when you go in reverse order, this is what makes the most sense. A CPU like the i5-10600K would certainly be able to utilize more of what a Z490 motherboard can handle with the overclocking potential, but when it comes to PC flipping, I haven't seen much of a difference between the 400F and 600K versions over the last few years. The most important part of the model name is the Intel i5, and then of course the generation. And real quickly before we move on to the RAM selection, if you're trying to keep those profit margins high for your own PC flipping business or even just your very next PC flip, then today's video sponsor can definitely help you out with that. Today's video is sponsored by GVG Mall, and you probably already know that I've been using them for so long to activate Windows on a ton of my own builds. They're actually running a huge sale right now, which boosts my normal 18% discount up to 25% off if you use code ZTT18, and I'll have that linked at the top of the description. They not only have Windows keys, but also a ton of other stuff such as Office and even game keys for platforms like Steam, Origin, and Uplay, and they even have console stuff too like PSN and Xbox prepaid cards as well. Activating Windows is super simple and only takes like 3 minutes total, so activate Windows today and remove that nasty watermark, and don't forget to use ZTT18 for 25% off. Alright, so next up we have the RAM, and here's a T-Force Vulcan 2x8GB 3600MHz kit, and I picked this up for 38 bucks. Honestly, there's no recommendation really needed for budget RAM these days. There's a plethora of different options for a 2x8GB 3200 or higher megahertz kit, so just go with whichever one you can find a good deal on. We are at the point where used RAM usually isn't any cheaper than the new RAM, so I wouldn't stress trying to save maybe 5 to 10 bucks on a perfect used snipe and just go with a new kit from Amazon or Newegg. Same thing with the SSD. Here I have the Team MP33 512GB NVMe drive, and you just aren't going to realistically beat the $22 that I paid by searching for a used deal. While we're here though, I do want to mention that I've been typically using slightly better drives than the MP33 lately because there's just so many options available, and sometimes the deals are better than the MP33, but this one specifically was on a great sale. 22 bucks for a super fast NVMe storage drive is great, and for a $500 to $600 total build price, I think you can still get away with a half a terabyte of storage for higher profit margins. If you don't agree, just go with a 1 terabyte model. And the last thing we want to do here with the motherboard prep is the CPU cooler to properly chill our 10400F, and we're going to shake things up a little bit today. I was originally scheduled to use this ID Cooling 224 XTX Black, which I bought on Amazon for $30, and this is always a really solid option if you're looking for an all black and minimal cooler for your flips. However, Deepcool just happened to send this AK400 digital cooler right before we started filming, so I figured I'd give this a try because it looks pretty neat. For the flipping guide and just flipping in general itself, I would still recommend the $30 budget CPU cooler because that'll allow you to get the higher profit margins, because the AK400 digital, this is really cool and it's for people that are building like personal builds where it's more acceptable to spend more money on the cool stuff, but you'll get lower profit margins with the CPU cooler like this. So just go with this one if you're only flipping, and this is what I'm going to include at the end of the video in the parts list as well. This AK400 not only has the all black design that we were looking for in the first place, but it also has this digital readout screen, which is pretty dope. You can show not just your CPU temperature, but also the utilization percentage and a couple of other things, and it only requires one USB 2.0 header, which is great. This can sync up with all the popular RGB software like Aura Sync, Razer Chroma, and MSI Mystic Light, which is what I'm using, and I'll have the link for this down in the description along with everything else we're talking about. Moving on, it's time to get to our power supply, and this continues to be the toughest component to shop for when it comes for budget builds. Today I have the EVGA 500GD, which is an 80 plus gold non-modular power supply, and thankfully this one has been kind of staying at a not terrible price over the last couple of weeks. I personally paid $65 for it, which isn't a great deal, but this is a pretty solid budget unit, and since most of your customers will already know and trust the EVGA brand, it's a good pickup for a budget flip right now. And I'm also of course going to be plugging in some cable extensions to spice spiced up the build a bit, and I decided on these Asia Horse teal and black extensions that I already had sitting in my studio. I actually bought these a few weeks ago for my $1,000 build guide video because I thought they would match up with that blue fractal design case that I had, but since the colors didn't quite match up right, I didn't end up using it. Every other part inside our build is pretty much all black, and whenever this is the situation, it usually looks good to use a loud color like these for the extensions because then they really pop. And speaking of the black components, the case that they're all going inside of will be this Gamdias Talos E3 Mesh, and I'm a big fan of this one for PC flipping specifically. This is an ATX case that comes with 3 pre-installed RGB fans, and like the name suggests, there's this mesh front panel which is great for airflow. I also like the signature Talos E3 clean and minimal basement design, and overall this case just has a wide open potential for aesthetics, and it comes in at a great price of around $70. And finally, once all that's installed, the last thing we have to do here of course is the GPU, and this is honestly my least favorite component of the entire build. This is the Zotac Twin Edge RTX 3060 12GB, which was on a killer sale on Java down to $220, but I personally just don't like that we're using this slightly gray card instead of a cleaner all black one. To be honest, I already had this 3060 for a previous benchmarking project where the aesthetics didn't really matter, and I'm also using it because the Gamdias Talos E3 tempered glass side panel is pretty tinted, which will hopefully help us hide this color mismatch as well. On the flip side, however, I do actually like the RTX 3060, but only specifically for PC flipping because, as we know, our customer base usually prefers NVIDIA over AMD no matter what we tell them, so this still is a really good graphics card to get the higher profit margins. The 3060 has been going in the low 200s on the used market for several weeks now, so when you combine it with another signature performance component like a Ryzen 5 or an Intel i5, you'll be gearing up that build for a nice margin. And speaking of which, here's what our entire parts list is looking like, and as you can see, our total build price comes out to $610 today, and again, that's with recommending the budget CPU cooler instead of the not great for a flip but still very dope AK400 digital. Because of that 10400F and 3060 combo though, I don't think you'll have any problem selling this one for around $750 for a nice $140 profit. If we do a quick search on Java for RTX 3060, here you can see the competition for builds, and I think $750 will be the sweet spot for a solid quick transaction. Remember that Java is ultra competitive when it comes to PC flipping these days because there's just so many talented builders and sellers on here. Going back to our build though, here's the benchmarking numbers that we got, and as you'd expect, we got some great results in 1080p. The 10400F and 3060 is already a proven combination, so this shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. And for one last benchmark, here we have the Time Spy score just so you have a consistent comparison across all of my builds if you're debating about which one to copy. And just in case you feel like you'll need some extra help with your next gaming PC or gaming PC flip, feel free to hit me up at zackstechdrift.com/consulting. I'd love to help you out one-on-one to make sure you're buying and building everything correctly so you have peace of mind before making any purchases. If you aren't a fan of any of this PC building just in general, or you have a friend that's not into flipping as much as you are, we of course have our restock builds available every day of the week over on zttbuilds.com. Hopefully you enjoyed this episode of Flippin' Friday. Make sure you click the playlist that's on the screen now to catch up on all the other flips that we did previously, and I'll see you guys in the next video.